We're back with Table Talk with Brenda Perryman today. I hope we just showed In Trayvon's Footsteps. Look for it to be shown again when they do a rerun of the show. I think you'll like the film. I think you'll get it. And I'm excited about today. And we're going to give a shout out, of course, to the victims and families of those affected by 9/11. Uh, Everybody knows where they were. But first, I'd like to introduce my co hosts or them introduce themselves.
I'm Ellis Liddell, and I agree. 9/11 was a day that I was on the 17th floor in the Prudential Building, known as Town Center, and we got a call from a client basically saying, "Get out the building," because they thought maybe every tall building was going to be under
Oh,
attack. So
oh,
we all have memories of that day, and you're right. Everybody was watching TV, and then when the second one went into it, it was like, wow,
yeah.
unbelievable. And the country's come a
Did
long
you
way
feel
since then.
helpless?
Absolutely. I think everybody felt the same, and that may have been the closest we've all, as a group of people, have been since that day, because we've had all this racial divide, which we're going to talk about later on, that happened after the fact.
Right.
Good morning. My name is Darnell McLaurin. I'm a public servant as well as a union director. And on 9/11, I was at work. I was at the fire station, and we were watching it on television. And so, our adrenaline went in overdrive because, we were given the order to lock down. We assumed that, maybe the Renaissance building was going to be under attack. We were all looking, to be in the same situation as those 343 firefighters in New York City. So I definitely remember it. We'll never forget it. It was a day that I'll never forget.
I'm Ken Coleman, author and historian. Certainly, 9/11 was a very surreal day, and I echo all your sentiments. I started out the day. It was election day. It was primary election day in Detroit, and I was senior editor at the Michigan Front Page covering the mayoral election. I'd gone to vote right after 7 a.m., like I would normally do if I was working on election day. And by 8 o'clock, I actually dropped my wife off at work, and we started hearing about the first plane going into the first tower. And I don't believe there was a moment for the next 10 or 12 hours where I wasn't watching TV. Very, very much transfixed on what was going on Manhattan that way.
My son had just arrived in Japan because he was going to be playing basketball in Korea, and he just arrived in Japan and he went to a bar. He was in the bar, and all of a sudden, phones start going off all over the place. And there were a lot of Japanese at the World Trade Center. They had businesses there and everything. And I remember him calling me frantic because at that time when that goes on, you want to know where your family is, be close to your family. And he just was kind of frantic. He said, "Mom, we can't fight them. We don't know how to fight them," because he thought it was so unfair that that happened. But I guess a lot of us did. My nephew, who was a New York City police officer at the time, had to go to the site and dig every weekend, dig. And at one point, they found the bodies of 6 firefighters laying right in a row under the rubble. And then years later, my nephew had his lungs collapsed and everything. He had issues. And you know what's so bad is the city or the country did not want to pay these firefighters. Did you hear about that, Darnell?
Yes, of course. It was an ongoing issue. A lot of guys were affected by the smoke and the dust and so on and so forth. And so, yeah, it was a very expensive undertaking to take care of all those individuals. And the city, of course, didn't want to.
They didn't want to. And these guys volunteered. They didn't get paid to go out there and dig every week. A lot of people volunteered, and that fine dust
Yes.
got through those gas masks and everything. It was crazy. So I wrote a poem that was published throughout the country called "All I Did Was Go to Work," because just like Darnell said, it could have been anybody. Because those people in the World Trade Center, all they did was go to work.
Right.
Right. And what you have to understand is the 343 that died that day were the acute. There was a
3,000.
there was a 343 was the acute symptoms. chronically speaking,
Oh.
hundreds more have passed away due to the dust particles and so on and so forth.
Right.
Firemen, police, volunteers all across the world who went and worked on the pile have become ill and passed on. So we like to, definitely keep those people in our prayers as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Just scary. Now, as we do, and this is September 11th, we've already done some on this day where we were, but in Ken Coleman's book in 2001, Kwame Kilpatrick, State House Democratic leader, and Gil Hill, City Council President, emerges the two nominees to vie for the office of mayor of the city of Detroit. The 31-year-old Kilpatrick secures an impressive 50% of the vote. Hill, a former homicide detective who was in Beverly Hills Cop, amassed 36% of the vote. The rest of the field of 21 candidates includes attorney and 1993 mayoral hopeful Sharon McPhail and city council member Nicholas Hood. Dennis Archer, the city's current mayor, decided not to seek a third term. The energetic and charismatic Kilpatrick will defeat Hill in November's general election to become the youngest person ever elected. What if things were different and Gil Hill won? Do you think anything would have been different, or things would have just panned out the same anyway?
No, they would have been different, but unfortunately, it is written.
Now, at the time, I agree. I mean, at the time, Kwame was a superstar. I had worked on a state house staff when he was the leader of the house, and Lansing loved Kwame Kilpatrick. I mean, people forget Kwame got both the major newspaper endorsements. Gil was a very popular city council president, the lead vote getter on city council for years. But Kwame was a superstar at the time, although there were clearly signs, and some of it had been reported about some of Kwame's challenges and foibles even before that September 11th primary election. But he cruised in the victory 2 months later, as you point out.
And it's funny because I was out of town just so coincidentally, just around November, just before the election. And I was actually staying with my friend Donna Richardson and Tom Joyner. Oh. I was staying at their house, and believe me, around the country, people were watching that election because they were into Kwame Kilpatrick. You know, Kwame had a great magnetic personality.
Indeed.
Right. I think certainly things would have been different. I would like to have known how economically those things would have been changed, like the structured deal with the casinos. Some of the important things that I believe would have played a part in how the city would have been able to handle the bankruptcy issue as well as the emergency manager issue. So those are the things I would have been interested to see how they would differ from Kwame to Gil.
I think that the leadership would have been the sort of kitchen cabinet leadership of Detroit, the city of Detroit's politics would have been very different on the mayoral side. I always got the sense covering that election that Gil was going to be somebody who was going to delegate a lot of authority to seasoned city hall professionals. I mean, I had the sense at times that maybe Freeman Hendricks might have been part of that administration, that Charlie Williams, who had been really Mayor Young's number two, might have had part of that administration. That Gil would have been more of a sort of a more inspirational leader, not necessarily ceremonial because we have a strong mayoral form of government, but Gil was always good with putting young people in great places. My criticism of Kwame's administration was, I think that lots of the people, his inner staff were people that didn't understand city government, and you really couldn't tell them anything. They believed they had all the answers. They did when they were in Lansing, and they certainly did in City Hall, and I think that was part of Kwame's challenge.
Wow. Well, speaking of mayors and everything, I just thought about, well, our first topic does deal with President Obama coming and talking about the college affordability plan, but I remember seeing Warren Evans in the crowd. And I think that Warren Evans came into this knowing that he was going to cede some of the power of Wayne County, because everybody knew Wayne County was broke. And now I don't like what's happened. But anyway, what did you think of the president's? A lot of people were mad because President Obama didn't come to Detroit. But what did you think of his visit?
Let me just say this here. I think we're seeing it. If you don't have any education in this country, it's going to get bad. When you walk into a McDonald's today, you used to see young people in McDonald's, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Now you're seeing 40 through 65 and sometimes older than that.
Right.
So when you watch that demographic change, it lets you know that we have to do something. It used to be, we lived in a country where your hands, your skills could carry you. You know, it's back to that whole Booker T. Washington and W.E.
B. Du Bois.
You know. And the skilled labor people are now having a harder time making a great living because the country's pretty much built out.
Right.
And even though there's building going on in pockets, it's not the construction area that it was before. It's not the manufacturing area that it was before. We're watching this country change. Companies like Uber will affect manufacturing of cars eventually.
Yes.
If they stay on the planet. And right
Why
now
do you
they're
say
moving.
that? Tell the audience why you say that. I imagine.
You know, in most cities, the challenge is transportation. Detroit's been one of those last strongholds for cars and transportation because we had the big three here. This is car country. Well, what's happening now with Uber all over the world? People are just trying to justify a car. In Detroit, especially, with insurance rates being so high, it is so much. When you look at it from an economic perspective, from Detroiters, an individual perspective, not so much from
Detroiters, I mean, the highest rates in the country.
Absolutely. When you look at, if you pay, listen, you've got a car costs you $500 a month, and you're paying $500 a month for insurance. That's $1,000 car. You living in Jackson, Mississippi, that's a Range Rover, not a Focus. So it's getting more challenging. So what Uber is doing, they stepped in there and initially thought, well, big city, where now they're transporting kids to school. It's so many applications that each of us had a thought of
Metro Rail
Uber.
is coming. Metro Rail is coming.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's not going anywhere. How many miles?
It's the writing on the wall.
Yeah, that's
That's
true.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But one of the things, what really has to happen though, is the American has to care about his people. That's hands down. I'll tell you why I say that. Right now, there's a contingency of Belgium firefighters from Holland all across Europe that's in Detroit, right? Because we all know Detroit is the mecca of firefighting. If they lose their job, they only lose 20% of their salary
Really?
because their government doesn't want homeless people.
What?
Okay? Think back with Muammar Gaddafi and what he did for the Libyan people. Nobody in Libya worked. Only people that worked in Libya was foreigners because the government has so much money, nobody had to work. But what did we do to him? And which is what he was trying to do to the African continent itself, changing it from four different types of money into one. But that's another story. But flat out, we have to care about people. And once technology is good, but it also hurts us. You look at Pittsburgh, the steel mill, right? 90% of the steel that's used to erect buildings in this country now is purchased from China. And when they tear down buildings, they sell the steel back to China. China melts it and reforms it and send it back to us.
And the other buildings that are still standing, the Chinese own.
Exactly. So we have to start caring about our people.
Unless you're Dan Gilbert.
But, going back to what Ella said, an education. I mean, this is like saying an education, if you want it, is free to you.
Well, from the political perspective with President Obama's community college plan, one of the challenges that he's faced since he announced in January is that congressional Republicans are saying this is dead on arrival. One of the reasons for that is this president, and he did the same thing on the Affordable Care Act, he's really gone it alone. He said he's looked at the political landscape on Capitol Hill and said, these men and women aren't going to work with me no matter what I do, no matter how great the plan is. And so I've got to find ways, what President Obama, I believe, is saying at night, I've got to find ways to get this done on my own with congressional Democrats and using executive privileges through orders and the like to get things done. I read some reporting this week that Lamar Alexander, one of the U.S. senators from Tennessee, and you might remember Lamar Alexander. He was a former education secretary under the first President Bush. He's a former president of the University of Tennessee. Senator Alexander got a call from President Obama a couple of days before President Obama announced his plan. Senator Alexander is upset. That he wasn't, he was not part of the planning, just part of the heads-up consulting. And that's what Republicans are using. That's the excuse that they're using to sit on this plan. And again, the president, if he's successful, is going to have to find a way to get enough Democrats and moderately thinking Republicans to support him, because this is going to take an appropriation. This one's different than some of the executive orders around immigration. This is a big funding package, a huge funding package. Right. And so it'll be interesting to see if the president can get this done with about, a little bit less than a year and a half left in his presidency.
Yeah, but, I don't understand why a particular party does not want funds going into education. They want to abolish the education department. What is that about? They want to leave it all local, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, the general philosophy around the Republican Party is local is better. We don't want the feds telling us how to lay out our program. But let me speak really quickly to the setting, because you mentioned the setting at Macomb Community College rather than the president coming to Detroit proper.
Well, people are complaining.
Well, yeah, absolutely. But I've actually got a theory on that, at least in a political sense. And I'm not necessarily. Actually, I think it's a good thing that he did it at Macomb County Community College. Macomb County's been really called a political bellwether for the last 20 years. Reagan Democrats are there. People who traditionally are maybe even be union households, but have voted Republican in some presidential elections, depending on who the Democrat is. A lot of them reside in Macomb County. Again, I think for the president to be successful at this, he's going to have to sell this to a pocket of people who aren't voting for him and other Democrats at an 80 or 90 degree clip. If he can be successful in taking this show on the road in places like Macomb County across the country, they may be able to, those people who benefit from that, having the president in their town, they may be able to encourage their congressional member. That's not too far from Candace Miller's territory. Right. Maybe they can get her to support the president. So I think part of the road show has a political strategy to it. If he came to Detroit where everybody's pretty much on the same team, and he's come here post-Kwame a couple of times. It's not like he, during the Kwame era, he stayed away. But I think that was a good thing.
Okay.
But back, just one last point on that education. Keep this in mind. I mean, education, it has to happen, because if it doesn't happen, what's going to happen, and Mark Cuban said it before I ever thought of it, these colleges are going to start filing for bankruptcy. So they need some funding. And the more colleges that are filing for bankruptcy, you'll have, in a small town, there might be 4 colleges, but 2 are going to go under. And they may get absorbed by the bigger colleges. Well, we don't want to see that happen.
Well, it seems like they want education for the elite as opposed to the common person.
Well, keep this in mind. Even the wealthy need somebody to work for them. They'd be able to read a label.
Right.
than to feed them something that's not going to keep them
But
alive.
then, it's that other thing about some corporations want to hire more people, but everybody's not qualified. Some people, the illiteracy rate is so high locally.
Correct.
There's so many variables in there, and there's a lot available. There really is a lot available through, and he talked about apprenticeship programs,
Right.
because everybody is not going to be a doctor, lawyer, teacher, whatever.
Now, everybody's not Brenda Pyramid.
Right. 7 billion people on the planet. There aren't 7 billion jobs.
Right, but everybody doesn't have to work.
That's true. But the opportunity for everybody to have education, health care, should be there. So it's a universal concern,
Right.
but it's not being addressed universally.
Right.
So when you just speak about America in itself, I mean, when you look at the homeless rate, the unemployment rate, the lack of education rate, we have to start caring about people and making the changes that helps everybody and not just a select few based on your income status.
Right. Well, let's quickly go to the fact that he ordered paid sick leave for federal contract employees. And a lot of people got upset about that because some places they can't afford to give paid sick leave. I think you should have paid sick leaves personally.
Well, you can afford what you want to afford. That's how that works. So if you say, I mean, keep in mind, if I'm a contractor and I've got a $100 million contract, can you imagine if I have a $100 million contract, me not making at least $1 million a year out of that?
Right.
Personally?
Personally.
Because you think $100 million, oh, he got paid. However, the more cost associated with getting that $1 million, I've got to figure out how to cut somewhere. Well, they didn't have to pay for sick leave. So if you didn't show up for work, you didn't get paid. Where now it's going to cut into the profits of the guy who was smart enough to get the $100 million contract. So you can always push back because it may mean instead of driving your Porsche, you're going to have to drive a used Porsche. You know, if you want a Porsche, you're going to get a Porsche. But
Can you get a used? Is there such thing as a used Porsche?
Pre-owned.
They call them pre-owned.
That's right.
It's not used. It's just pre-owned.
You know, I agree with Ellis. You know, think about 20, 25 years ago, y'all, when women had children. There was a time when there wasn't a Family Leave Act. This country decided, Congress and the president, and business went along with it, that this is what we wanted. This is the type of family values and quality of life that we wanted for American people, to give mothers an opportunity to bear children and give them, you know, a period at which they can transition away from the workplace but back to it. Yeah. We can do the same thing with this situation if we have the will to do it.
Right, that's true. That's true. I remember, well, being a teacher, you didn't get paid in the summer anyway. You have a, you know, once I had a child in April, but I got paid to the end of the school year. So I, you know, because I had a contract. But it was a little different with teachers. I want to move along to the two players who hit the referee. What did you all see the video? The video,
Yes.
It was a referee. It was a football game. And it looked like two players came and hit him intentionally.
I played PAL baseball. You know, a lot of us grew up in sand lots and playing football and baseball. I can't imagine. You know, we had coaches. They were more than coaches. They were really They were extensions of our family. They were big uncles. They sometimes they played the role of your dad if your dad wasn't there. I can't even see that happening in my lifetime. I mean, it's one of the places where you learn discipline and structure particularly as a young man. And seeing that video is just crazy to me. I don't know where we're going.
Especially, and if I heard correctly, is that the coach encourage these kids to do that, right? So,
well, you know, Texas is a great big football state.
And they live in, and that's the thing
Right.
about this setting too. I mean, they live and breathe
right, but
football.
can you imagine the repercussions if the mentality of those kids to do that to a coach? I mean, to a referee.
Right.
If that, you know, happened at the college level, if that happened in the pros, you know, what are we teaching our kids nowadays? Now, sure, the referee could have been out of pocket by what he said. I heard it was a racial statement, but there's ways to address that. Just as there is a governing body for that football system that oversees and rules, they could have took it to that level as well.
I want to say something. Authority is what you're describing, and that's what Ken, you know, listen, he almost started crying when he was talking about it. So it just let me know that authority was placed into him. That referee was seen as the ultimate authority on the field of play. Mm-hmm. Now, have I been to games where that, you know, be it basketball or football, where you want to kick the referee out the gym?
Right.
You know, everybody has, but you don't do it.
Exactly.
And now we're at a point where that people are doing things that we wouldn't consider as young athletes doing, but it goes back to what you said. Now what's going to happen is they're going to see this on YouTube. They're going to see it everywhere.
It's viral, right?
And someone else is going to say, well, wait a minute, that referee was out of control. Now, a referee is part of the playing field.
Yeah.
He's part of the field of play. So now, did they fall on him accidentally, or did they target him? Well, when you watch the video, it looks like he was kind of targeted.
He was definitely
It wasn't another
targeted.
player.
Right.
There wasn't a ball near him or anything.
Right. So with that in mind, it's going to be interesting to see how this is ruled, because the referee literally is described as part of the field of play. So what do you do? Do you punish a kid for stepping on the grass that's on the field or stepping on the turf?
Right.
No, you don't.
Yeah,
so this is
but-
going to be interesting to see how it plays
But I
out.
would punish the kids who listen to their coach to go out on the field and do something malicious as attacking a referee.
If the coach
If the coach
Coach,
did
in
that.
fact, did.
you know it's going to end up that the coach didn't say that.
Of course,
gotta-
he
you gotta throw the
leave him out
kids
to
under the
dry.
bus.
He gonna leave
They
him out
have
to dry.
somebody that they think said it.
Right. They're gonna leave him out to dry. Bad situation though.
Well, I think if these players were good players, they could have possibly gotten a scholarship. Now they're off the team, and who wants them?
It's a sad situation
all the way around.
Right. Now, Freddie Gray's family was awarded $6.4 million. Freddie Gray is the man in Baltimore who was, well, they say the police officers killed him because they didn't transport him right to jail, and he was paralyzed and then he died. A lot of police officers are saying this isn't fair, because 6 police officers, I think, are being blamed for his death. And they say it isn't fair because by them, the city paying them, that means the city must be guilty.
Well, they are guilty.
They are good. I mean, that,
But they say
but
they
they're
are
the first
agents.
ones to be guilty who didn't pay, of course.
Right.
But I mean, if you took a route and you went out your way and you didn't tie the guy down, you didn't lock him down, and it's almost like, there's a law in America to wear your seatbelt. That's not, but you don't have a choice. You get a ticket for not wearing a seatbelt, but yet instead you put somebody in the back of a transporter,
Thanks to
and you
Richard
don't
Dawson.
secure them,
right.
and you let them bounce around, then you violated laws. So then you should pay.
I believe it was hogtied as well, correct?
Well, I don't know about that, but I think before he even got in, he was having trouble with his legs. I mean, I think it was as a result of them.
I'm not a lawyer, but and clearly this had a process in the city. They are agents of the body corporate, the city of Baltimore, and to me, it's a no-brainer. Hopefully, you certainly feel bad for the family, and by the way, this comment is not designed to sort of imply a disclosure in that sense, but at least there is an element of, in the finality of this, there's an element of a fairness in a monetary sense toward the Gray family. It is yet another example of why these high-profile incidents. Well, number one, I've always said they will continue to happen. But number two, the hope is that there will become criminal justice reform on the law enforcement side, and on the legal proceedings and judicial side. We've got to find a better way. I respect first responders. We talked about them in the role they played in 9/11. We all respect them, but there has to be a continual reform process that goes on here, and maybe the Gray situation, the Freddie Gray situation, will cause that to happen, if in no other place than Baltimore.
Right. And so what you hope is that the repercussions and consequences, deter other members from acting ill towards the public. And that's what I'm hoping that it does. Or the 6.4 million isn't enough, if you ask me. Right. But certainly everybody who wears the badge should look at themselves and say, hey, am I doing the best for the people that pay my salary, basically? Because you killed a guy that's paying your salary, more or less. And so that's the way I like to look at it, as being a public servant when I interact with the public. This person pays my salary. So I work for him. And so for me to go out and do something wrong to the person, my employer, in essence, I have to reevaluate who I am as a person. And if I continue to that behavior, am I really right for this particular position?
You know what? When you introduce yourself, you said something that was critical. You introduce yourself as a public servant.
Yes.
Because you believe it, you live it, you breathe it.
Yes.
So that's who you are.
Yes.
Not everybody who takes that oath has that same creed.
True.
And we're going to get to another story with
Right,
regards to
right,
that
right.
soon, and talk about someone who, no respect for human life, no respect for, I slam you,
Right.
I could hurt you forever. The damage, not just mentally, not just
Right.
emotional. Oh, my feelings hurt. No, 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 no. You hurt.
Right.
When I was doing research for On This Day, I ran across an ad for the police department. They were recruiting African Americans. It was from the early 1970s, at a time when Detroit didn't have a lot of black police officers. And the ad, you guys may remember this. The ad had a black police officer in the police uniform, and the caption said, "Detroit Police Department. It's more than a gig." And the idea meaning that this is a very particular public servant position that you really mentally have to be about doing. You have to care, and it is not just a gig. It is not just punching the clock at 9 o'clock and punching out at 5.
Exactly.
That's not the order of existence anyway. For most. And so, when people gravitate to these professions, Darnell, I know you appreciate this, man. You've got to have that mindset that you are. I think it's even more than. And I respect what you're saying. I think it's even more than sort of saying to the public, I work for you. I think it's almost you have to. It has to be a calling. Like Brenda, when Brenda became a teacher, it was a calling.
Right.
There are professions that she may have been more lucrative for her
Right.
financially, but it was a calling that she had, and the good teachers. They all have that.
And
They
did
all
a
have that.
phenomenal job as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I was lucky,
Well said.
but thank you. And we're going to go to the New York police station. I mean, the issue that happened with former tennis pro James Blake, who was coming out of a hotel going to the American U.S. Open,
yeah.
and he was attacked by a policeman because he thought he met the description of some people who had defrauded some people. What were your thoughts on that?
Well, first and foremost, when you have the world watching, and it's most unfortunate that it wasn't a TV camera somewhere to just fully capture everything that occurred, but the U.S. Open was prime, and on the night that this occurred was a big night for the Open.
Yes.
So when you have these things happen, it's an embarrassment, and that's probably why they apologize. But how much are they going to give him for this, for slamming him? Does he get $6.5 million
No.
while he's alive to apologize?
No.
Or, oh, we're sorry, we thought you were someone else. Well, there's protocol, there's process and procedure.
Right.
It was not followed.
Not at all.
His rights were damaged. Now, he's not going to be remembered as the guy who was a top 10 pro player. He's going to be remembered as the guy who got slammed. So his imaging has now been damaged forever.
Right.
And that has a value.
And that's part of his brand now. Really?
Oh, yeah.
Well, watching Blake's interviews and seeing his printed statements and printed press, I think he's handling it in a way that I'm happy to see. I mean, he is a well-known name. I mean, Blake, as a professional tennis player, had some flashes of greatness. I mean, he definitely isn't necessarily a household name, but it is a big enough stature and figure that for him to speak out on these issues and to raise concern about these issues and to talk about them in a way that, hey, it could, I'm a former tennis pro, but it could be, Johnny down the street, is very important. But this has happened continually in our history. The thing about New York City, we've talked over the last 20 years about New York being a much safer place, and a lot of it is because, and Brendan, we talked about this before, because your son. I mean, the stop and frisk police mentality in New York City has a very sort of clean image in terms of its sort of corporate representation. New York is a much safer place than it was 25 or 30 or 40 years ago. One of the reasons why, because they stop and frisk, they crack people's heads, and there was a federal judge a couple of years ago that said, now this wasn't necessarily the stop and frisk policy at work, but it is still the style of policing that sort of knocks you over the head and tackles you first and asks who you are second. And that's, I continue to say on this broadcast and every place else, as a black man in America, that's very scary to me. Elvin Davenport, the first African-American Recorder's Court judge in 1965, was pulled over by a cop. and haul downtown. Judge Davenport was probably in his 50s at the time. He fit the description of what the white cops were looking for. If a seasoned Recorder's Court judge on a Sunday morning who goes to church at Bethel AME, without fail, who has a very clean record, can get hauled downtown and detained over a period of time. That was 50 years ago, but the reason why I'm mentioning it, because it still happens now. It is very, very, very troubling, and we're going to see more of these cases. I believe, again, I give Blake kudos for handling it the way that he has. You can be very bitter about these things and take a real sort of negative approach, but it's a telltale sign that we are still in America.
I wondered why in the article they continually mentioned that he was biracial.
I saw that in one of the pieces. I didn't necessarily understand either why that was an element
I
of the story,
either.
but
And he said he didn't want to play the race card, but race had something to do with it.
Well, he fit a description of somebody, right?
Yes.
So it was already, the card was
Wasn't
played for
everybody?
him.
well, I subscribe to the old Southern axiom of the one drop rule. I mean, if you got any black in you, in the eyes of some white folks, you're black. I don't care. I don't care if your mom was white or your dad is
Yeah,
white.
but I was
you're black.
curious about the
Why
New
they-
York Times article.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't know why.
And
it
the
was there.
reason why is so you can take the focus off Black Lives Matter campaign. It wasn't just a black guy. It happened to biracial people.
Maybe
too.
that was it. Maybe that went over me.
Ah.
That could be it.
Right.
Yeah.
But the one thing I want to see happen, be it Baltimore or New York, wherever, I hope the powers that be take these situations and use it. I know oftentimes we have a situation in my job. We'll use that as training. Okay, so this doesn't happen again. We're going to give you guys some, refresher training. Come up with a new protocol, new SOP, SOG to avoid that from
What
happening.
are those acronyms?
Standard operating procedure.
Right. And
Oh,
standard operating
goodness.
guidelines, exactly. So I'm hoping that somebody is saying, okay, listen, from now on, we don't do this. We don't body slam people in the middle of the street for whatever reason. It has to be some type of educational learning process from all these ills that's happening, so they, can stop them from.
So does a apology resolve that? Will that become now policy? Or if Blake sued the city for $10 million, which one would get more attention?
Oh, and of course, the $10 million would get more attention, and it's not even about the apology. It's about the actions of the police department, security force, guardian alarm guy. It's about the actions of those individuals. So the apology is one thing, but to go out and do it again is another thing. So if you body slam somebody today and you apologize to the news media, but your members aren't being taught not to do that,
Right.
and then tomorrow they go out and body slam somebody else, then maybe the administration is the problem. Maybe the people that's running the show is the problem. But, and that's one of the things I like about James Craig. You talk to any police officer, they love him, because he's coming in and he's changing some things around. And I think sometimes that's what you need, is a fresh perspective or a different view from what you've been used to.
And we've talked a lot about the administration, the administrative side of it. At least in terms of contract negotiations, you would certainly hope that the union side and during collective bargaining negotiations and ultimately would become contracts, that union leadership will walk hand in hand with administrative leadership and forcing some of these changes to happen.
You hope.
Certainly not implying that unions haven't,
Right, yeah,
but it's
no,
a two. It's a
exactly.
two. It's a.
Yeah.
It's a two.
Well,
Lockstep.
my whole thing is, I don't think a person should get all full of themselves because I make this money or I make that or I do this or I do that. You, like you were saying about the judge,
Judge Davenport.
you're still a black man in America.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Ellis Liddell has this beautiful jacket on. He looks snazzy, but if he looks like my suspect, he's going down.
And I better be nice about how you take me down, right?
Right.
I might not get back up.
That's not funny, but
Black
that's
man in
true.
Highland Park with a suit jacket on. All three of us could be,
No question.
body slam.
There's a fine line between Huey Newton and I don't know whoever the
Right.
billionaire, African American billionaire.
But my thing is, I wouldn't even, don't say you're sorry, because sorry didn't do it. I know that sounds childish, but that apology stuff, I'm so tired of people apologies and apology tours and all of this stuff.
Did I read that they pulled the officers temporarily? I mean,
Yeah, they pulled the main officer who
among
did
Put them
it.
on desk duty.
for pending further review. Not implying that that's a appropriate response, but there was some action taken in addition
And that, and to be quite honest, that's the standard operating procedure. That if you get involved in a shooting, investigation, we put you on desk duty, keep you off the street from interacting with the public until we resolve the investigation.
Well, that's better than what we got in the 1970s with stress, because you had one white officer that was involved in shootings with 5 different people.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
and there's some people that do this thing better than others.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, and
Peterson, Officer
I don't
Peterson.
know where this ends, because people are starting to blame Black Lives Matter for policemen getting killed now.
And they shouldn't. And
They really shouldn't.
let me just say this here. In order for when the Klan was running rapid throughout America, they had to sue the Klan for violating human rights. Perhaps some of these police departments will ultimately get standard operating procedures that say you don't body slam a person because it's not on my watch. We need more people who stand up, because remember when they used to put a black officer with a white officer and they put them together and at least to try and diffuse the situation. We've come forward to go backwards.
Right, right. We have a call. We have Steve on the line. Good morning.
Good morning, Ms. Perriman. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, you can ask Jerry Rue Campbell about being body slammed. He got punished more severely than those police officers, in my opinion. Ms. Perriman,
Yes.
I respect you, and I respect I respect your show, and I respect the fact that you talk about education. And one Friday, if you guys just spend your time completely on education, because what we've seen is the government has destroyed the teaching profession right before our eyes. You got urban centers in the state of Michigan that no longer have one public schools. Can you imagine that in 2015? When there was a time when the only profession blacks could matriculate to was the teaching profession. I wholeheartedly happen to believe that I don't believe in really teacher certification. I believe in the old standards of putting a teacher in a classroom and putting he or she on probation for 3 or 4 years. We watered down, we've dumbed down education, as Ella Fladell has said. Where do we go if we take education? As the gentleman in the middle said, we got 3 billion people, but not 3 billion jobs.
7
We are
billion.
not preparing our future, and then we keep wondering why we have crime. We wonder why we have petty crime that leads to serious crime. We look at our state of education. In Seattle, Washington, the Supreme Court just declared charter schools to be unconstitutional.
Well,
The teachers are striking.
Right. Well, with teachers, you do have that probationary procedure or time, and then you have to take classes, more classes. You have to constantly be learning throughout the profession now. And there are a lot of good teachers out there, but there are not a lot of good schools out there because some of the administration, and like you say, the government kind of tells you we're going to do this test, and a lot of people, they try to kind of teach to the test, then they get in trouble for teaching to the test because they want their students to achieve. But also, as far as education is concerned, there's a big dropout level. And I
What-
just, people find I could get some fast money out here in the streets.
That's because everything we do is we've gotten away from going from a Ford LTD to a Cadillac. We want the Cadillac first. Everything is fast paced, but the thing that drives me so crazy is if I'm a drunk and I can't convey my knowledge, but I pass a test, I'm now highly qualified. You see, the
true.
thing of it is, my teachers, which would be your age, Ms. Perriman, and beyond, were a hell of a teachers. Excuse my language. I mean, look, you can look at this, the handwriting. You can look at the thought process. I can look at my grandmother's handwriting, my aunt's handwriting, compared to the kids' handwriting today. How the dumbing down has occurred. We've got kids that are now writing ACT essay using text language.
You know, the other thing is I want to make. I agree with a lot of what you said, Steve. Did want to make the.
Thank you for your call,
Yeah,
Steve.
did want to
Thank
make
you.
the distinction though. Technically, charter schools are public schools.
Right, public charter.
Yeah, I mean they're supported by taxpayer dollars. I understand the philosophical concern about them. Notwithstanding that, Brenda, I had a good conversation a couple of days ago with a good friend of yours who was raised in Catholic schools, Godfrey Dillard, and we were talking
yeah.
about. He was talking about reminding me and educating me about how how in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, even into the 70s and early 80s, how Catholic schools, particularly in our community, was really a set of organizations that provided, I think, a lot of what we're missing now in the public school setting, traditional public and charter, the discipline, the rigor, everything that goes along with that. And Godfrey was making the point that was a very, very important experience for him.
Mine too, because when I got to college, I said nothing can be as hard as high school. Shoot. Yeah, it was different, and I don't know what's going to happen, except I do know there are some charter schools out here that are not doing the job, and I don't think that they are accountable. But that's a whole different thing, and like Steve said, maybe one day I need to just do a show with just education. But quickly, I just wanted to talk about this survey that race relations are worse than they were a decade ago, and I'm just going to quickly quiz you all on it because we have a couple more topics. What do you think?
You know what? Not to put you on the spot. How many white friends do you have?
A lot.
Thank you. Ken.
Several, not as many as black though.
Now, those watching, everybody needs to adopt a non-black friend. I'll say it like that.
Right. Well,
Because there are communities that still don't ever interact with black people.
I know.
And if you don't interact with black people, the only option you have is what you see on TV.
Yeah.
It reminds me of when I first went to college. This guy named Sheldon, I haven't forgot him to this day. He came up and he was from South Dakota, and he said, "Excuse me, do you mind if I touch your hair?"
Why are you talking like that? That's so.
Well, that's Sheldon,
I know,
that's Sheldon's voice.
Uh-huh.
And I said, "No, I don't mind you touching my hair." So he put his hand in it, and he says, "Oh." And I said, "Where are you from?" He told me a little town. He said, "There's a military base there." So the closest I've ever come to, back then we were black, a black person was across the street. I saw one guy one time.
Oh, yeah.
And so I do think more people need to keep at least. You had one in elementary school. What happened to him?
Yeah, well, they always move, but no, seriously. But
Moved
I
across
do
8
have-
Mile.
I have all kinds of friends, but the thing is, the more you know about people,
Right.
the more comfortable, or not comfortable, but aware you can be. Because some of my students would go away to college, and they come back and say, "Oh, Miss Perriman, there's so many white people there." I said, "So, I mean, that's the world. That is the world,
And that's one of the problems with Michigan being one of the most segregated states in the union. There's no diversification. But I, unfortunately, even going to Highland Park High School, I lived on a street in Detroit that had white families on that street.
Right.
And I'm still friends with them to this day.
Right.
In fact, I was over their house about 2 weeks ago, and was there for about 3 hours. Then I left the city of Detroit and went to the military. Lots of white folks. And since I've been back home, I work with white folks. So me personally, I don't have an issue. I can work with anybody. I was in Korea. I've met all type of people. So I don't have a problem personally with anybody. But there's a lot of individuals who have a problem with me simply because of the color of my skin. So they don't give me the same benefit of the doubt that I give them. And that's their loss.
I thought that absolutely.
You
I thought
one of them light-skinned brothers.
Oh, no,
he's an Elite. He's one of the Elites. Quickly,
I'm biracial.
I was there. You go.
What you know about Eli?
I think I was right on the numbers from the survey. Really jive with what I think America is. I mean, I've heard white people sort of imply at times. I mean, y'all got a black president now. What's your problem? Everything should be all. This is the most segregated city in America. Just saw a Google map, a story that the Free Press published, where whites and blacks and Asians and people happen to be Latino where they live. It is still as segregated as it was 40 or 50 years ago. We just don't all live in Black Bottom. Some of us live in Southern Oakland County, but outside of Southern Oakland County, this is still a very white metropolitan area. And unfortunately, I think a lot of our children, our nieces and nephews and grandchildren don't get the opportunity to interact with white people.
Well, don't you think
unless
that
unless you go to Army,
they
unless you
should
go
have
to
a
the
diverse
Or you go away to school.
population in their schools?
No question. I mean, I think that the school district should adopt friendship opportunities with other school districts. Say, if Canton to Grosse Pointe, Detroit to West Bloomfield. I think that has to happen. Lots of churches do it, and within some denominations, they foster that type of experience. I know Plymouth Congregational has done it for 50 or 60 years, but not enough of it is done.
So let's go back to what you said,
Sure.
which is critical. So if you're not getting an opportunity to interact with a person that's not of your, we'll say race, everybody's a human race, but if you're not getting a chance to interact with an African American or someone from Asian American, whatever, then how do you earn a respect for that person? Because again, all your images came from where?
Television.
Yeah.
Now the internet.
Or what somebody else told you.
Right.
Reinforced by absolutely.
To reinforce the old story about I heard y'all had tails.
But
That was because somebody told you that.
But I think it's more than just the social interaction now, because we've talked about this last couple of weeks how the economy, not the economy is changing, the economy in America has changed. One of the reasons why you've got senior citizens and teenagers battling for that McDonald's job because the manufacturing jobs have gone to Mexico. Right. So now you're going to see what you saw in the 40s and 50s. There's going to be a lot of resentment of white people to black people because the market is shrinking, the employment market is shrinking, and there's always a scapegoat. History has shown us there's always a scapegoat that takes the hit for that. Well, I would have had this job, but it had to go to somebody else from another persuasion.
Here's another one. Do you know that most black Americans or African Americans don't have an African friend or Caribbean friend? They don't even interact with other black people from around the planet.
True. That's
so
true.
in reality, there's a lot of work still yet to be done.
Oh, culturally, and it's crazy. Listen, we're almost at the end, so I'm going to skip the LeBron James story. Even that young man who gave that $3.5 million to Michigan State, the black athlete.
Draymond Green.
That was so wonderful.
Got out of Saginaw.
And, it seems like athletes can give back, or people who make a lot of money can give back, and I always admire that. But they're saying that Calvin Johnson is too old, and I protest that because he is so cute.
He's getting ready to say, I knew it was going to be, I knew you were going to end up, well, he's fine.
No, well, more than that, he's a good guy.
He's not too old. You know what? We're seeing athletes go into 35, easily 35, and we've got some 40-year-olds still playing the game. The quarterback for Pittsburgh, what's his name? How old is he?
Roethlisberger?
Yeah, wouldn't he be like late 30s now?
Probably early 30s, but he's been in the league 10, 12 years,
Right.
which is longer. Life expectancy for an NFL player is like 4 years on average. Right. So in that regard, Calvin is on the backside of his career. There's no question about it. White people are raising that. I know, but you'll see him more when he's not playing on Sundays. He can be around the community more, so he can come do the show.
But he should play but he ought to have another good 4 or 5 years.
Well, he may. The concern.
Look how long
Think the
when
position-
Jerry Rice left the game.
Sure.
Jerry could have played for 2 or 3 more years,
but
it was the salary caps that caused people not wanting to bring him back. It wasn't because his talent had waned.
Jerry was a physical specimen, and not everybody. Some of it is just genes and just being lucky. The reason why people are concerned about Calvin is because he's starting to miss games. Jerry Rice had a streak that was almost incredible. It was almost an Iron Man streak. He was almost never hurt. Right. Calvin has missed 2 or 3 games here, 3 or 4 games there the last 2 or 3 years. He at 30 in the NFL, you're on the backside of your career,
Well,
and it can end. It can end if he gets hit the wrong way.
Exactly.
But keep in mind now, they're asking Calvin Johnson to do things with his body that Jerry Rice didn't have to do with his body. So,
True.
that, don't get me wrong. He has a
couldn't catch
quarterback.
Jerry Rice.
They consider the quarterback that we have as a good quarterback, and he's a good quarterback, but he's not a great quarterback.
Thank you.
Because the
So-
biggest difference is
Yeah.
Jerry Rice always caught the football on the other side of the defender. Calvin Johnson is always on this side of the defender and have to fight his way through.
It's a different game. I mean, they play jump ball with Calvin because of his size. It's like throw the ball up and put the ball in a spot. Calvin will go
Nice
get it because he's
long
6'5".
legs.
And that's
Jerry
wrong.
Rice played a different type of game where they threw
6'4",
5-yard passes and he ran for the other 40 because he
Right.
was a sprinter. It's a different.
But he was on the other side of the defender.
Right.
You know, they
That
gonna
makes
put
well
it
two
easier.
because
people
of
out
his
there.
Okay,
because
one
of his
quickie.
speed.
What about Tom Brady last night?
Hey,
Powerful.
game recognized
He
game.
made a
Touchdowns.
statement.
Yeah, he
Made a
said.
Hey,
statement.
what did I say the last time? He's saying, I'm the superstar,
Yeah.
not you. You just work for us.
Yeah, and so what's going to happen is, I was listening to the radio last night. Roger Goodell, the NFL commissioner, pulled in $44 million his last tax return that the media was able to get their hands on.
Quickly.
So you're going to see him lose some of his power in terms of the disciplinary action. He's going to have to hire an
Yes.
assistant to do this, and he ought to, for public relations reasons, because obviously he doesn't know how to get it right.
Kaiser Sose, Tom Brady.
Tom
Everybody,
Brady and Mike
thank you for
Gronkowski.
joining us. Thank you for joining us. And we will see you again next week with Table Talk with Brenda Perryman. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda.
Have a good day. Good weekend.